So may I take this opportunity to offer a few reflections on the Buddha's teachings? The Buddha never asked us to, say, blindly believe things just because even he said it, but to take the teachings and, investigate them and see if they're true or not. Luang Por Chah used to often quote a certain exchange between the Buddha and the Venerable Sariputta, where the Buddha asked the Venerable Sariputta, do you believe me, Venerable Sariputta? And Venerable Sariputta said, no, I don't just believe you, but what you say I take into consideration and investigate it. So the Buddha didn't want to just take things on board because he said it, but just to investigate it so we can actually develop our own wisdom and understanding. So we could come to understand what the Buddha had come to understand. So not just taking things on a superficial level, but really looking deeply into and testing out these teachings. And what we chant in terms of the Dhamma, encouraging investigation, to be understood individually by the wise. So there was one occasion when the Buddha was staying outside of the coastal kingdom. In those days, these kingdoms were heavily fortified and they had walls around them, but the Buddha used to stay inside the walled area, but stay outside in the forest area around these places more quiet for meditation. And sometimes word would get into these cities that the Buddha was nearby. So on this one occasion, King Pasenadi, who was the king of Kosala, came out to pay respects to Buddha. Through his wife, the Queen Malika, he'd come to learn some, things about the Buddha that brought some sense of respect for the Buddha. So he's conversing with the Buddha outside the kingdom. And then all these ascetics start walking by. Sort of matted hair ascetics, Jains, naked ascetics, long fingernailed ascetics, all different types of ascetics walk by on the way to the city. And King Pasenadi, as custom was, to pay respects to any sort of sadhus or ascetics, went over to them, knelt down, put his hands in Anjali and said, I'm King Pasenadi, king of Kosala Kingdom. So just a way of paying respects to these ascetics. And then he goes back to the Buddha and he says, those are arahants, purified ones, or ascetics on the way to arahatship. Those are practicing the way to arahatship. And the Buddha's response to King Pasenadi was, it's difficult for you to know, King Pasenadi, with so many distractions and caught up in sensual pleasures, to know who's an arahant or who is on the path to arahantship. Then the Buddha gave the king some guidelines about how to know if somebody was an arahant or on the path to arahant. And firstly, like not just to take things on a superficial level just because they're wearing robes or they're ascetics. And the criteria the Buddha gave was not judged from just seeing, but actually from actually associating with. And not just over a short time, but over a long time. And for one who is attentive and not inattentive, or for one who uses wisdom, not for one who doesn't use wisdom. So this was a criteria that Buddha recommended, to associate somebody and then just to see how they behave. And the criteria to keep in mind as you investigate is one, what is the virtue like? What is the dealings with people like? In times of adversity, what is the forbearance like? And when they're questioned on things, what sort of do they manifest skillful responses? They manifest wisdom. So these are the 4 criteria the Buddha suggested to the king as ways of, getting a sense if the person was an arahant or on the path to arahantship. Again, over associating for a length of time, being attentive, and really using one's wisdom. And then, King Basedi then, said sadhu, he appreciated the teachings. And then he made a confession. He said, actually, Lord Buddha, those are not real ascetics. They're my spies. I send them out into the countryside to see if there's anybody plotting against me. And then the Buddha's response was, yes, not to judge things by appearances. It's like a clay earring covered in gold or a bronze coin covered in gold. People can walk around in the guise of the restrained but not be restrained. People can walk around looking inspiring but be inwardly corrupt. So this is an example of the Buddha really asking us to investigate and look more deeply, and not just taking things on the superficial value. And in another teaching, the Buddha elaborated a little more on these 4 qualities. And in terms of virtue, in terms of their actions of body and speech, are they skillful, wholesome, or are they unwholesome, depraved? Of course, in the Buddha's teachings, the basis for virtue is the 5 precepts. And in terms of, this is something to reflect on in terms of the people we put our faith in terms of teachers, or the people we associate with. These criteria are good to bring to mind in respect of these people. Of course, like for the Sangha, they have more precepts, so that they keep a reasonable standard in their precepts. And then lay teachers, that they at least keep the 5 precepts. So, there have been, many, different things in the media about gurus and different teachers who've really lost it a bit, in terms of embezzling funds and taking sexual advantage of their disciples and abusing disciples, being alcoholics even. So these are sort of things to really look out for. Does the person, guide their actions of body and speech in a reasonable level of skillfulness? And it's an ongoing thing to investigate, because some people start out quite good, but sometimes fame can corrupt people. Get carried away with fame and popularity, and as the Buddha said, fame can be like the bamboo that flowers to its own destruction. They lose the initial aspirations, intentions. And, dealings with people, integrity in dealings with people, honesty, have they been honest and clear in their dealings? And also just the way in which they do relate to people. Are they, friendly and have time for some people, and unfriendly and dismissive of other people? And this can be in terms of, the attitude towards, the rich or the poor, whatever nationality, whatever religion, whatever, people who are famous, not famous, the way they, deal with people. That they only have time for some and dismiss others, and friendly to some and not so friendly to others. In times of adversity, the forbearance can be seen. So the Buddha elaborated on this in just the way they deal with the worldly Dhammas and the difficult aspect of the worldly Dhammas of loss, criticism, blame, unpleasant experiences, and disrepute. So when they experience these things, that they get caught into despair, angry, depressed, intense grief, or do they keep the mental balance? And the Buddha said a wise person, contemplates these worldly dhammas, brings them to mind often. Living in the world is like this. We're going to experience, praise and blame, happiness and suffering, gain and loss, fame and disrepute. It's the same for us all, on some level. And just to expect that we should always just have gains all the time or praise all the time, it's like, like expecting every day to be a sunny day. It's not the way the world is it? And so the wise, when they reflect like this, it means that when they do experience, criticism and loss and unpopularity, when that they don't get too dragged down by them. They can keep their mental balance because they understand from their wisdom, this is what living in the world is like. When we're born into the world, this is what we have to experience. And just from experience, it doesn't mean we don't experience certain reactions to these things, but because we reflected wisely, it lessens the intensity of them. So, like, losing a relative, it's a natural response to that is a sense of sadness. So, I lost my father a few years ago, and sad to lose one father, but because, one's reflected that, old age, 88 years old, it's natural people have to pass away. So because of reflecting like that, there's a sense of sadness, but, it was a sense of peace with it, just acceptance of it. It didn't like go into a set of deep grief. So when we lose things, whatever, if we're now with the situation in the world, a lot of loss in terms of, financial things. And, this is also, life in the world sometimes is gain, sometimes is loss. And if we reflect like this, maybe we don't fall into pits of despair. We learn to adapt to the changing conditions. So it's not that we don't experience responses to these worldly dhammas, but the intensity of them is lessened. So we don't get overwhelmed by them and fall into the pits of despair. In terms of the sensory world too, we have to see things that are beautiful, see things that are ugly, hear things that we like, hear things we don't like. And then on the physical level, sometimes the body feels good, sometimes we get sickness, and there's unpleasant feelings in the body. So how we bear with that too? Can we keep our mental balance when we experience unpleasant feelings? Because this is the world, isn't it? And maybe we haven't become famous in this life, but just a sense of sometimes, we can be popular with people and they can turn. Misunderstandings happen. And somebody who was very friendly to us one day can be not so friendly the next day for certain reasons. And this is also the way life is. Sometimes you do things to try and help people and they don't appreciate it, or even criticize you for it. So, this is sometimes also the way the world is. So, when one feels adversity, if we have forbearance, then we can keep our steadiness and our skillfulness in that time of adversity. So this is a quality of a good practitioner, one who can maintain that. When they're sick, when they're criticized, when there's loss of relatives or material things, or when they're not popular with people, And then, how they respond to people. The sort of skill the Buddha praised was somebody who could say words that would help to lessen people's confusion, bring people more to peacefulness, calm, and bring people back to more skillful ways of seeing things and more skillful quality of mind. So just like the example of the worldly Dhammas too, the ability when things are difficult to actually bring up some wise reflection. Sometimes it's nice to, we like to contemplate the Dhamma when we feel good and it's so nice, but actually to bring it up when things are challenging. But that's not the only criteria. There's these 4 criteria, because there have been people who have written very good books, very inspiring books, but the quality of their life hasn't been so skillful. So it's not just this ability to teach or to say wise things. These other criteria also must be there. So these are the criteria the Buddha said to investigate in terms of judging somebody's character. And after association over a period of time, being attentive and using our wisdom. So this is something to consider, when we put our faith in teachers, whether they live up to this, a good level of this criteria. I think it's a good thing to bring to mind. In our Theravada tradition, we have more refuge in Sangha. And the Buddha never elected like a Dhamma heir, but he said, let the Dhamma Vinaya be your guide and be refuge in Sangha rather than a particular monk or nun. And I think this is very healthy because, monks and nuns come and go. Some leave in unfortunate circumstances, some leave because they've got interest in other things. And you see, if we just invest so much of our faith in a particular monk or nun, then of course when they leave, we lose faith, we get disappointed. And I've seen this in monasteries, certain quite good teachers and charismatic monks are disrobed, some in fortunate circumstances, some in unfortunate circumstances, and people losing faith and don't see them again. So I think it's healthy to have more a sense of refuge in the community. So even if a certain teacher leaves, there's still the sense of that connection with Sangha. Like in the time of the Buddha, when Sariputta and Moggallana passed away, Ananda came to the Buddha and said, he was very sad, Moggallana and Sariputta have passed away. And the Buddha's response to that was, yes, 2 great branches have fallen off the tree. But, the tree's still there, the tree of Sangha. And it's quite a nice analogy, because you think about India, the tree was a great source of shade. In the hot of the sun, you'd sit under a tree to find coolness and to refresh oneself. So even though branches fall off the tree, if we have that refuge in Sangha, the tree's still there. We can still go there as a place of coolness, a place of support. But if we just sit under one branch and that falls off, so these 4 criteria that the Buddha asked us to investigate is also something to investigate in ourselves too, and things to develop in ourselves. Our virtue, our dealings, how we relate to people, how we bear with adversity, and studying wise teachings so that wisdom penetrates into the heart and can come up when it's needed. So again, the Buddha is not asking us just to believe these things, but just to consider them for yourselves. If you think there's something of value and can be useful, then use it. If not, then you can just put it aside. But he did, encourage us not to just judge things superficially, but to look deeply, to find out for ourselves. And in this way, we can come to realize what the Buddha's realized. With wisdom, we can, see what leads to suffering and what leads away from suffering, and what leads to unshakable peace of mind. So, I'd like to offer these thoughts for your reflection this evening.